morning. My name is Dave Larson, and the reason I'm chairing this meeting is because our distinguished chair, Linda Cohn, is experiencing some laryngitis, and she thought it would be difficult for her to speak up that well. So I'm going to fill in for her. First, I'd like to call the meeting to order. And then the first thing on the agenda is a recognition of our land-grant professors. President Kaler and Provost Hansen are going to kick off today's meeting with that recognition.
Thank you, Regent Larson. I'll invite Provost Hansen to join me at the podium.
The goal of the McKnight Land Grant Professorship Program is to advance the careers of exceptional new assistant professors at a crucial point in their professional lives. McKnight Land Grant professors are junior scholars chosen for their potential for important contributions to their fields, the degree to which their past achievements and current ideas for research, their potential for attracting outstanding students mark them as very special. The designation of McKnight Land Grant professors is held by recipients for a 2-year period. The award consists of a research grant in each of 2 years, summer support, and a research leave in the second year. I'm going to read the names of those chosen as McKnight Land Grant professors and ask them to come to the podium while we say a little bit about their research, and they pose for a photo with President Kaler, and then stay up here with President Kaler while the others are introduced. First, Jake Bailey. Jake is an assistant professor, Earth Sciences, College of Science and Engineering, University of Minnesota, Twin Cities. And his project is Microbes as Agents of Geological Transformation. Bailey's research explores the role of bacteria in the formation of certain types of mineral deposits. The study of living bacteria can tell us about the mechanisms that lead to the formation of minerals, while the study of ancient fossilized cells and chemical signatures in the rock can tell us about the origin and evolution of the organisms and the processes they catalyze. By combining these different approaches, Bailey seeks to understand those phenomena that occur at the interface between biology and geology, whether in the modern biosphere, or in the ancient past. Saw the press sitting there.
Thank you so much.
Nice to meet you. Jasmine Fu. Professor Fu is an assistant professor, School of Mathematics, College of Science and Engineering, University of Minnesota, Twin Cities. And her project is Discovering the Mathematics of Cancer Evolution. Cancer can be described as an evolutionary process. Tumor cells rapidly divide, accumulate random genetic variation, and compete for limited resources within the body. This process results in a highly diverse, adaptable tumors that can evade our best therapeutic interventions. Mathematics, and specifically probability theory, the study of randomness, provides us with a powerful tool to try to understand and predict the complex patterns of evolution in cancer. Fu's research focuses on developing mathematical models to understand the evolutionary processes driving cancer initiation and progression, with the ultimate goal of utilizing these models to design better prevention and treatment strategies. Annika Maria Sophie Hartz. Professor Hartz is an assistant professor, pharmacy practice and pharmaceutical sciences, College of Pharmacy, University of Minnesota, Duluth. And her project is P-glycoprotein, a new target for Alzheimer's disease. Memory loss in Alzheimer's disease is caused by high levels of toxic amyloid beta in the brain. This phenomenon is a consequence of impaired amyloid beta removal from brain to blood. The transporter P-glycoprotein is critical for removing amyloid beta from the brain, but in Alzheimer's disease, P-glycoprotein is degraded and not functional. Hartz has worked with her team to design 2 novel therapeutic strategies to, 1, restore P-glycoprotein function, and 2, prevent P-glycoprotein breakdown. The aim is to prevent amyloid beta brain accumulation and to lower amyloid beta brain burden, with the ultimate goal of improving memory and delaying onset and slowing progression of Alzheimer's disease. Congratulations. Alice Lovejoy. Professor Lovejoy is Assistant Professor, Cultural Studies and Comparative Literature, College of Liberal Arts, University of Minnesota, Twin Cities. And her project is Aesthetic Experimentation and Political Critique in State-Sponsored Cinema. We often conceive of the state as a restrictive, repressive force for cinema. Lovejoy's research, however, considers the ways in which the state and its institutions have, historically and transnationally, played a productive role for cinema, spurring formal innovation and, perhaps paradoxically, political critique. Lovejoy's first book explores the emergence of an experimental film culture in Czechoslovakia's Army Film Studio. Her second book examines how state-administered children's film studios in countries like Iran and East Germany fostered aesthetic experiments and critiques of their state sponsors. Through these studies, Lovejoy's research delineates new understandings of the relationships between art and politics. Rusin Yang. Professor Yang is an assistant professor, mechanical engineering, College of Science and Engineering, University of Minnesota, Twin Cities. And his project is Tiny Power Plants Gobble Up Wasted Energy. Straight from the pages of science fiction, nanorobots have emerged from this scientist's research on self-powered nanosystems. Far from a hostile force, however, nanorobots are ultimate sensitive sensors which will do such things as monitor glucose levels or detect structural cracking. But how do we power them? Changing a battery embedded in a patient's body or a building is usually not practical or painless. In theory, the sensor could siphon wasted energy from its surroundings. Muscle movement could supply it, or building vibrations. But how do we harness this energy and make it work for us in these tiny devices? Yang's work seeks the answer. And we have one additional land grant professorship to award, but unfortunately the professor can't be with us, but let's get a sense of this research. Mo Lee, an assistant professor in electrical and computer engineering, College of Science and Engineering, University of Minnesota, Twin Cities. And Professor Lee's project is integrating nanoscale optical and mechanical devices for communication, sensing, and quantum physics. Lee's research combines nanoscale optical and mechanical devices on integrated semiconductor chips. Lee's research team develops nano devices that explore the interaction between light and forces in the regime of classical physics and quantum physics, where light acts as individual photons. Lee employs state-of-the-art nanofabrication to make optical integrated chips in which novel optical devices are connected with optical wires, waveguides, for high-speed optical communication within or between chips, for optical computation, and for biochemical sensing. Lee and his team also strive to use these optical devices to reveal novel quantum effects and perform measurements with resolution limited only by the principles of fundamental physics.
Take a group photo. Very demanding.
Thank you. And now we're going to move on with the approval of the minutes of the last session. May I please have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
And now it's time to move on to a report of the president. So President Kaler.
Thank you, Regent
share your
Larson.
report.
Thank you, Regent Larson. First, allow me to congratulate Regent Cohen and Regent Johnson for their re-election to the board. I'm delighted with that outcome and very pleased to welcome our newest regent, Regent Omari. Welcome back to the Board of Regents, having served as a student representative previously. And finally, Regent Lucas, I welcome in absentia. She unfortunately has had travel plans for today and cannot be with us. Our two newest regents bring both bring important experience to this board and deep connections to the university and the broader community. Peggy is a very successful business leader in our community, and Abdul, a doctoral student who also received his undergraduate degree at the university and has worked in central offices as a graduate fellow. Welcome. The next week will be extremely important for the outcome of our legislative request. As I will detail for you later in our meeting, next Monday and Tuesday, I will report to the House and Senate Higher Education Committees, respectively, our response to the Senate's request for details on our administrative structure. And also on Monday, we will present our budget request to the House Higher Education Committee for the first time. I invite you to attend both sessions, as your presence at legislative hearings is very important. I know many of you attended or watched from afar my State of the University address last week, and I thank you for that. I was proud to declare that the state of the university is strong, and I spoke of where I'd like to see us go in the next 12 months. And just to review quickly, first, I want to develop a new strategic plan to guide the next generation of decisions for our university. I expect the plan to guide priority setting and create greater alignment and accountability across the university system. I want it to be transparent and engaging so as to create a shared purpose. But as you might imagine, I want to avoid being bogged down by excessive processes. It is not going to take us a year, and we are not going to form 100 committees. Over the next few months, I will work with my senior management team, governance, and this board to develop the planning process with the goal of launching it in the fall. Secondly, I spoke about maintaining our excellence in our graduate programs. I came here as a graduate student, and I am not about to be the president who lets our graduate programs slip away. We need strong, competitively funded programs to attract the best graduate students in the world to Minnesota. As you know, 3 years ago, we implemented a plan to change the way we manage our graduate programs. We gave the colleges resources, authority, and local control. We've learned a lot about that process over the past 3 years, and I think it's now time to take a look at what has worked and perhaps what has not worked, and to make recommendations for improvements. It's time for what I've started to call Graduate School 2.0. I've asked Provost Hanson and Vice Provost and Dean of the Graduate School, Henning Schroeder, to develop recommendations to sharpen our focus on graduate education. Thirdly, and moving into the research front, I explained that when I talk with faculty, I consistently hear that we make it difficult to do the kind of interdisciplinary work that defines the cutting edge in most fields and that is critical to solving today's problems. Whatever barriers we have to interdisciplinary research at our university simply must go away. So I've again asked Provost Hanson, together with Vice President Herman, to develop recommendations for facilitating more interdisciplinary teaching and interdisciplinary research. Fourth, I spoke of the unnecessary administrative burdens we face, those that we impose on ourselves because we have a low tolerance for risk, or because we are afraid that a misdeed of 2 or more decades ago will reappear. Of course, I expect and I'll insist that we always meet our legal and regulatory obligations, but at the same time, we must recalibrate our tolerance for risk. And that means we must look at our own internal policies and ask the question, do they meet or do they exceed our legal or regulatory requirements? If they are excessively burdensome, going beyond what federal agencies or other entities require us to do, we should change them, or we should make the conscious decision not to. So I have asked each vice president and each policy owner to review their policy through this lens of risk recalibration. And until we reduce the burdens on our employees and drive substantial simplification, I'm not going to stop pushing my colleagues on this issue. Fifth, I discussed our plans to develop a comprehensive employee engagement strategy. I hear from employees that they want to be more fully engaged. They want a clearer career path, and they want meaningful evaluations and career guidance. Employment engagement is a best practice used in many effective private sector organizations. And sixth, and the most fun, I announced that I'm going to start holding office hours for students on all of our campus. I love meeting with students, and I'm going to do that monthly, and when I visit Crookston, Duluth, and Morris in the coming months, I'll conduct an office hour there and look forward to doing it also in Rochester. In other news, a search for a new leader of our academic health center and medical school is underway. All told, in the speech, I believed I laid out an aggressive, well-rounded agenda for the next year, and it will be a busy year for sure. The year's begun with great demand. For our Twin Cities campus, we've received 42,301 applications, up nearly 5,000 from last year, or 13%. The old record for applications on the Twin Cities campus was 39,500, which we beat. Applications are up for all of our statewide campuses, with Crookston up nearly 17%. Our national reputation is growing, with out-of-state applications up 38%. Applications from students of color are up 15%, and those from Greater Minnesota are up 11% for the Twin Cities campus. I think that's good news, and it's an indication of how attractive we are to top students and their families. As I'll detail later this morning when I discuss our operational excellence work, we have done more in the past 18 months to study and understand and reveal the costs of instruction and administration than I believe any university in the nation has done. We're currently undergoing further studies about our management structure and how it compares to our peers. Those studies are substantial, open, and reveal opportunities, so that while I do believe the state of this university is strong, we can continue to get better. I look forward to doing that with you. Regent Larson, that concludes my report.
Thank you, President Kaler. And now, I'd like to, again, speaking for Chair Cohn, and to reiterate what the President just told you about the re-election and the election. Regent Dean Johnson, to my left here, and Regent Cohn were re-elected to serve a second six-year term on the Board of Regents, filling 2 at-large seats. I believe I speak for both of them when I say this is a great honor, and I suspect also a relief. I am pleased that Peggy Lucas has been elected to serve as a regent from the 5th Congressional District, and that Abdul, across the room from me here, Omari has been elected to serve as a regent, filling the at-large student seat. Welcome to both of you. As President Kaler already mentioned, Peggy is not able to, Regent Lucas is not able to join us today, but we look forward to working with her. So I welcome both of you, and the board looks forward anxiously to working with you to fulfill the mission of our university. Regent Devine participated in a campus event on February 13th titled Focusing on the First Year, a conference dedicated to the exploration of issues facing students during their first year of college. Last week, on February 28th, Regent Beeson and Cohn attended President Kaler's State of the University. Regent McMillan viewed the address with faculty, staff, and students on the Duluth campus, and Regent Simmons did the same, viewed the address with faculty, staff, and students on the Rochester campus. Thank you both for your efforts in that regard. I'm sure the people there appreciated it. It was a reminder of the progress we have made over the past year and an inspirational call for continued reform in the pursuit of excellence. Yesterday, the board spent the day on the West Bank of the Twin Cities campus participating in a workshop on equity and diversity, followed by a variety of sessions hosted by the College of Liberal Arts. The University of Minnesota's mission is carried out through the great work of our students, faculty, and staff, so it is important to connect directly and better understand how the U is evolving to meet Minnesota's needs. This visit allowed Regents to gain a fuller understanding of the university and helps equip us to be as effective as possible in our governance role. It was a wonderful day, and the board was truly amazed by the experience. Thanks to Dean Parenti and his staff for hosting us. The next regular meeting of the board is May 9th and 10th, 2013. And now we need to receive and file reports and accept the quarterly grant and contract activity. Are there any questions or comments about that? Okay. The annual capital financing and debt management report and faculty and staff affairs committee information items. Anybody have any questions or comments about that? If not, then we'll move on. We have an action item coming up next. It's the consent report, a report on the All University Honors Committee, Gifts, Finance Committee report. We need a motion and a second on that.
Move approval.
Second.
Any comments, questions? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Next on the agenda is a discussion of the university's technology landscape. We look forward to the presentation. Vice President Studham, please come to the presentation table.
Regent Cohen, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to discuss information technology. I've been at the university for 12 months, and I'm excited to share with you my observations, including many of the great opportunities and plans for the future. Information technology is an emerging field that has had a profound impact on many industries. It appears higher education will be no different. This presentation is broken up into 3 sections, and I plan to leave plenty of time at the end for questions and discussion. In the first section, I'll provide a high-level overview of my observations about IT at the University of Minnesota, including culture and values and our plans for how we will be successful. In the second session, I will highlight 3 of the many opportunities that information technology is presenting to the university. These include e-learning, the enterprise system upgrade, and information security. It goes without saying that we have many more opportunities, and I fear we won't be able to do these 3 topics justice. I'm looking forward to a more in-depth conversation about these and many more opportunities at the May Audit Committee meeting. The final section will be looking ahead at some of the key initiatives over the next 6 years. I believe we'll be successful in transitioning IT to be a strategic differentiator first and foremost by recognizing that IT has a pace of its own. Many people suggest that IT reinvents itself every 18 months, but IT must operate inside the culture of the university. We'll be successful by aligning technology to support the academic mission, reducing administrative costs, aligning the IT function across the institution, and managing risk appropriately. Some recent capabilities that have evolved and matured over the last 12 months have included a greater focus of IT resources on the academic tools, the creation of a dotted line reporting structure from the 1,331 IT professionals to myself, and a growing understanding of the culture of we is greater than the culture of us versus them. We have many methods and metrics to measure our success, but the one that's most important to me is that we begin to change the hearts and minds of people to think of IT as a strategic tool and differentiator and not just technologists in a cost center. My passion is about blending the culture of this great institution with the pace and change of information technology. While I'll be the one giving this presentation, I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize many of the key stakeholders and partners on this journey. Starting with you, the board. Your continued support for creating institutional alignment and repositioning of the university, in part through the application of technology, has been greatly appreciated. President Kaler is unlike any person I've had the opportunity to work with. He's gracious and intelligent, focused and fun, and has inspired all of the vice presidents and chancellors to attack the challenging institutional problems and strive for operational excellence. Provost Hansen has the personal focus and commitment to continue to define the university's vision for e-learning. I admire personal commitment to ensure we navigate these murky waters. The academic leadership, such as chancellors, deans, and other unit executives, continue to carry out the difficult chore of establishing institutional priorities and balancing the unique and common interest. Finally, all of our students, faculty, and staff have been great at providing input into the annual IT governance process. Let's spend a moment exploring the culture of IT decision-making at the University of Minnesota before we start talking about the strategy to move us forwards. One of the best forms of benchmarking is from peers who've paid external independent consultants. You get true independence and you don't have to pay for it. Here's a chart that shows Huron Consulting report to the University of Wisconsin-Madison about IT decision-making. You'll see that Huron Consulting views the University of Minnesota as having a very distributed decision-making process that is also highly formalized. While I can see many challenges with this, including pace and cost if done poorly, I also have to recognize that this is our culture, and our culture doesn't change overnight. Instead of expending political capital on asserting a cultural change that may not stick, the strategy we're moving forward with is to leverage it and manage away any negative forces by focusing on operating with an excellence. As data will show in a moment, the University of Minnesota IT workforce is highly distributed. Historically, IT at many universities has been categorized as us versus them, or local versus central. This really is a false dichotomy. Our focus this year has been on capitalizing on our culture, and rather than focusing on us and them, we're focusing on growing a culture of we, inside of our distributed and formalized IT environment. Rather than having me tell you about this culture, I have a short 50-second video where a handful of IT leaders in information technology from around the institution will share with you how this grassroots culture of we has really caught hold.
I was asked to sit at a table and share my opinions and ideas. I'd never been asked those things of me before, so it was encouraging, and I really enjoyed the process.
I thought it was very important to have my voice heard and my college's voice heard. The benefits that I see in IT alignment is more efficient and effective use of resources.
Seeing what other people do gives you ideas of what you can do better. The speed of this change is refreshing, yet everybody's voice is being counted and heard.
People here working at the university really want to work together for the good of the university and for making things work well for academics, research, and outreach.
Now that we have an understanding of our culture and strategy of we, let's take a look at the size and scope of IT. As I mentioned before, I would like us to evolve past the thinking of IT as a cost center or simply technologist, and instead view it as something truly strategic. That said, one of the best ways to get our collective heads around IT is to look at the overall investment. Looking at the slide here, we can see how the University of Minnesota has 1,331 IT professionals across the system. In FY11, we spent $192 million across the system. I'm pleased to report that this number is down from $198 million in FY11. While I don't have as much quantitative evidence as I would like, it does feel like we're doing more now than we were in FY11, and this cost reduction is likely due to the strategy of we and the operational excellence initiatives. Looking at the pie chart on the left, you'll see how truly distributed the 1,300 IT professionals are. Only 358 of the 1,300 IT professionals report directly to me. The remaining IT staff work in other administrative units such as HR, finance, student services, or in the campuses and colleges providing local IT support to academic units. Of the $192 million we spend on IT $192 million we spend on IT each year, roughly 1/3 of it is spent in my organization. The pie chart on the right is a breakdown of that $73 million investment. You can see the largest investments are in the areas of end-user computing, where we provide a 24/7 help desk and desktop support for 100,000 end users, and in application support and development, where we run enterprise systems. Over the last 6 months, thanks to the support of President Kaler and the administrative and academic leaderships, we've been able to establish a clear dotted line reporting relationship between the IT professionals and myself and the other units. This next section is a highlight of the full presentation I'll be giving at the audit subcommittee meeting in May. This heat map represents the 5 highest risks and opportunities in information technology. In May, I will go into greater depth in these top 5 areas as well as many others. Today, I will focus on the top 3, which are the enterprise systems upgrade, aka PeopleSoft, the IT implications of e-learning, and finally, information security. Let's start with my favorite, and in my opinion, the most strategic, the IT implications of e-learning. Do you recall how you watched the Super Bowl? This picture shows a company advertising for people to show how they think people watch the Super Bowl. The viewers on the couch engrossed in the game. This picture shows how many families actually watch the Super Bowl. Viewers are engaged in watching the game, but more so in talking about the game with their friends. Technology is changing the way we interact with information. I'll leave it to you and other great minds to draw the analogies between these pictures and lecture-based classrooms. One thing is clear related to this quickly changing landscape. Anybody who says they have a clear answer on what it will look like in 10 years is being naive. It doesn't matter if it's online learning, such as the picture in the lower left, which is our online learning program, MOOCs, or even some of the emerging tools for immersive classrooms where every student participates via webcam and the students use each other's webcam pictures to hold each other accountable for engagement. Things are changing quickly, and each week it seems like we have a new game-changing technology introduced. However, this institution can take comfort in the fact that there are so many great minds here working together to grasp the rapidly changing situation. The process we're using to manage this at the University of Minnesota is not to react to each new technology, but rather to leverage the strategy to manage a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous realm of technology-assisted learning. To navigate this, we're using a tool called a hype cycle to manage new technologies as they emerge and the promise to be a game changer. Let me spend a moment explaining how to read the hype cycle chart. As a new technology gets introduced on the left side of the chart via technology trigger, expectations around it start to grow. We can all think of a few technologies that have highly inflated expectations currently. After some time with inflated public expectations, people realize that the technology doesn't necessarily bring forward as profound a change as everybody had hoped it would. Some people will even start to say negative things about this once overhyped technology. We call this the trough of disillusionment. Finally, technologies that haven't fizzled out move to a plateau where we find them productive and mainstream. At the University of Minnesota, we're placing new technologies on this graph and then assessing how long it will be until the technology becomes something that's mainstream. This can be shown by the shape and color of the graph, or by the color of the dot on the graph. For example, on the chart, the light blue circle for massive open online courses, or MOOCs, suggests it will be 2 to 5 years before MOOCs are fully mainstream. Meanwhile, something like a flipped classroom is more mainstream in less than 2 years. I'm happy to share with you my personal opinion, while reserving the right to be wrong, about how the University of Minnesota is doing in these technologies relative to our peers. The color of the wording is how well I think we're doing relative to our peers. For example, massive open online course text is light blue, signifying that in my personal opinion, we're doing well, not leading, not lagging. In the area of mobile learning and smartphones, we're lagging in my opinion. That's okay. We don't have the funding nor resources to lead or even do well in everything. I hope I've given you a sense for how we are using this tool to manage a very complicated and rapidly evolving technology landscape where no single technology has yet to emerge as the dominant force in instructional methods. Let's talk about MOOCs for a second and spend a little time thinking about the future. This graph shows we're probably going to see an increased inflated expectations around how transformative MOOCs are to higher education. At some point, MOOCs will move through the trough of disillusionment just like any other new technology. Most likely because people realize that MOOCs don't make the learning experience any easier, and much of the learning that happens in higher education is more active than watching a simple video capture lecture. However, at some point, they'll move to the plateau of productivity and just be one of the many tools we have in our technology arsenal. I'll leave this more complete version of the hype cycle slide up for a moment so it can sink in how truly complicated the e-learning landscape is and how there's no obvious single technology that we should go all in on. Rather, managing technology in this highly volatile time requires a consistent reassessment of each technology and a broad engagement of who's finding each one of these technologies beneficial. Moving on to our second opportunity, the enterprise upgrade. As you recall, the Regents approved the $83 million project at the July 2012 meeting. For us to take the operations of the university to the next level, we must have timely, accurate, consistent access to information to make near real-time business decisions. Operating the finance, HR, and student systems for a $3.4 billion enterprise is no small feat. Over the years, our systems have become highly customized, and we've invented many new best practices in the business processes. We've also invented a few that made sense at the time, but when we look at them now, we know better ways. This is more than just an upgrade. It's a chance for us to really look at the entire system and re-implement many of our business processes using industry best practices. The best analogy I have is the picture on the right. We've built a cell phone that can take pictures and has a monitor, but it's not efficient. The challenging aspect of this project is the overall change management and time frame of the project. The project itself is so huge that the time to discuss and debate the business process changes is now. However, the software will not be delivered until the end of 2014 or the beginning of 2015 due to the time it takes to develop the software. And what we decide now. Vice Presidents Fitzenreiter Brown and Vice Provost McMaster and I meet each week under the leadership of Dean Eldey to discuss and deliberate how best to ensure all necessary voices are heard at this critical time in the project. I've done a lot of these projects, and the rollout of these projects always tends to be a little painful. I'll be honest, this is a big project. That being said, I've never seen a project that is in this good of shape at this point in time in the project. The final area of opportunity is in information security and some of the structural changes that Chief Information Security Brian DeLynn and I are bringing to this critical activity. As I mentioned previously, we're a highly distributed IT environment with a focus on security operations. The challenge has been that each unit must locally develop their best practices on what it means to be secure. Frankly, we're doing a good job at security operations. However, we're making an investment in creating a consistent security framework for all of the university. The first step is to adopt national standards in security governance. We began this process on Tuesday when the President's Policy Committee provided comments for the data classification framework so it could begin the 30-day campus-wide review. The long-term vision is to move away from locally developed standards around information security and instead adopt national standards based on the International Standards Organization's 27001 and 27002. This will provide appropriate technical guidance to IT staff on how computers must be secured while allowing leadership the right visibility and oversight into expectations for where the business needs require something different than the national standard. When it comes to the operational aspects of security, we hold individual departments accountable for security. Security can't be done by any one individual, but it's rather everybody's collective responsibility. At the end of the day, I'm accountable and ultimately responsible to President Kaler for the health of our program. Over the last year, we've had 16,000 incidents. This sounds like a large number, however, relative to our peers, it's relatively small. Personally, I hope the number goes up. And we continue to do a better job at finding and reporting security incidents. It's a sign of a healthy program to have security incidents. An example of an incident is anything as commonplace as getting a virus on a computer or a student downloading copyrighted material. They're commonplace. It could also be as significant, though, as a breach into one of our core systems like finance or patient records. State law requires that we notify individuals of any breach of significance. These breaches could be something as significant as a stolen hard drive containing personality assessments of key individuals, or it could be an unauthorized access into protected healthcare information. Luckily, over the past year, we've only had 34 of these incidents, so 34 of the 16,000 incidents have been significant and reportable. This is the number I would like us to focus on continuing to see go down while realizing that relative to our peers, 34 is small, but it doesn't hurt to strive to be the best. We're very fortunate to have hired Chief Information Security Officer Brian Delenn to help us deploy this overall security framework and governance structure, and I'm confident about the model used due to the number of people I see actively engaged in intentionally moving this forward. Unlike other places I've seen try to do this heavy lifting of deploying an overall security framework, I can share with you that the people in the room are from all over the university and are honestly working to move this forwards. Finally, I want to close by highlighting our 6-year IT strategic plan, but first let me take a moment to explain our strategic planning process in information technology. We have a long-term planning process for information technology that's based around the institutional goals, the institutional 6-year plan, and the technology hype cycle we reviewed earlier. We use this to set major projects that take years to deliver. I'll highlight those for you on the next slide. We also have a much more nimble process for building our annual work plan. The process is based upon collecting input from academic units, reviewing recent technology trends, and finally looking at these initiatives if they're helping with the operational excellent focus of the university. For example, something that would come out of the 6-year plan would be the major enterprise system upgrade, while something that would come out of the annual goal setting would be the consolidation of the 73 IT help desks to a single point of contact. On our 6-year plan, we can see the 5 major IT projects that are underway and the time frame in which we expect to see them delivered. I've already spoken about the enterprise upgrade, e-learning, information security, and IT alignment by the culture of we. One project that I haven't spoken yet about is the Constituent Relationship Management Project, also known as CRM. Many people in the private sector will know this as Customer Relationship Management or Salesforce.com. Put simply, it's the ability for us to have a common and consistent interaction with the public via the university correspondence. This means that if an elementary student joins 4-H through the extension program and then applies to the university to join the College of Liberal Arts and ultimately graduates from Carlson School and goes on to become an artist or an athlete, season ticket holder, and a donor, we have a database where we have a consistent way to track their likes and dislikes, their name, and the individual provide the individual a more tailored communication. At the bottom of the 6-year plan, you can see many of the key technologies and services milestones. Last year, we focused on the consolidation of servers. This year, we've been delivering on the consolidation of help desks. This is being done to save money and bring efficiencies to the university. As we look to the future, we can see the promise of having more timely, accurate access to information based on the enterprise system upgrade and having emerging e-learning technologies more baked into the instructional methods ubiquitously across the university. In closing, we've come a long way with information technology over the past year. The scope of our $192 million portfolio is vast, and the projects such as the enterprise upgrade, information security, and e-learning strategy will require sustained focus and promise to have a long-term and lasting impact on the university. Likewise, many of the tactical short-term projects, such as the consolidation of the 73 university help desks to a single point of contact, or the creation of dotted line accountability, have already begun to have an impact on our cost and quality of services. While these are important and require sustained focus, these are not the things I hope you'll remember from our time together. I hope you remember our strategy of we, rather than us and them as catching on. By attacking the problems as we're able to continue to drive down costs. Just yesterday, Dean Parente provided many of the Regents an update on the wonderful work at the College of Liberal Arts and how they are planning significant cost savings by moving to a centralized desktop support model. While this is happening because of the hard work and leadership around operational excellence by Dean Parente, CLA, CIO, Jamie Hansen, and many others, this can only truly happen because many people have begun to embrace the culture of we. Finally, the thing I hope to remember the most from our time together is the promise that technology can be viewed as a transformative force for our great institution more than just a cost center or a risk. My hope is that 10 years from now, we all look back on this coming decade as a time of great change, not for the sake of change itself, but because we have been mindful and deliberate as we move the we culture together. Chair Cohen, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to update you on information technology, and I look forward to questions and discussion.
Thank you, Vice President Studham, for an outstanding report. And now I would like to invite the Regents to make comments or ask questions. Regent Simmons.
Thank you, Vice Chair Larson. Vice President, thank you for the report. I realize that the slide you showed us on is of expectations, the hype cycles graphic, but I found it really helpful just to see all of the things that are on that graph, and I have two questions about them. One, would it be fair to say that these aren't independent variables, so where we might be and your color coding could be affected by one that's in a different color coding, particularly if it's red? Is that correct?
Yeah. Chair Cohen, Regent Simmons, you're absolutely correct. They are very related to each other, and as we see one progress faster maybe than we even anticipated it has compounding effects on many of the other ones.
And my second question related to this is, how significant how concerned are you that lecture capture and retrieval tools for distant education is in red?
Chair Cohen, Regent Simmons, that's been an investment that we've begun making this year. Many of our video capturing systems were moving from a more homegrown solution to a product called Camtasia and Kaltura. They're industry standard technologies, so I expect to see a rapid change there over the next 12-month period.
Thank you.
Regent Allen.
Thank you very much for a great presentation. My question goes to kind of the whole heart of our work as a Research One institution. $192 million is a big budget, and much of it I expect is recovered by charging it back to various operations. In the research area, are we competing with, well, first of all, do we charge back most of our costs to projects who are using it? And does that put us at any disadvantage with some other research institution that might have found a way to finance the IT operation some other way, and they're essentially giving almost free time to researchers? That's a tough question to figure out, but I expect we're doing a balancing act there somehow. But right. How do we handle that?
Sure, Regent Allen, that's an excellent question. That it is complicated. Our support for research comes twofold. The Vice President for Research and through my office both support research computationally. The chargeback for it, we do provide about a third of it through central services. Most of it, though, is done locally. There is an OMB 123 requirement that we don't charge them for something that the feds have also paid for. When we recoup the overhead, we can't also then charge them as a principal investigator on their project.
Just to follow up, though, in the way we do it, are we finding that we have any tough competition among other universities of our research capacity? Are they doing it other ways that give them an advantage at all, and do we need to look at that question?
Chair Cohen, Regent Allen, that is a good question. I think we should continue to explore ways to optimize our research environment, but I don't see us doing it any differently than the other Big Ten institutions.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Vice Chair Larson. Thank you, Vice President Studham, on the report. My question loops into the next presentation as much as it does yours, and that is the organizational structure of this function. I've always thought that IT of any of the decentralized functions has the strongest argument to centralize, and the graph you have in here that indicates you've got about 360 people in the central office and then a larger number distributed out. I note that we're now going to be engaging Huron to look at our other sort of structural and delivery sort of processes. And I hope they're going to look at this function as something that is a candidate for further centralization, because you pointed out in your presentation the difficulty in getting best practice, and there is really no room in IT other than to have really a uniform set of standards, and otherwise it, I don't know where we avoid risk and how we achieve efficiency unless we've really got this. And looking at your heat chart of where the other universities, they're all over the board, but is centralization sort of occurring in the industry? Do you see that?
Chair Cohen, Regent Beeson, that's an excellent question, and we're looking forward to an external independent review and recommendations on that. But prior to receiving that, I'm happy to share with you my personal opinion on the centralization aspects in our industry. There are many aspects of IT that are best done centrally. There are many aspects of IT that are best done locally. Oftentimes, the most nimble aspects of information technology, the things that are closest to the researcher who's doing something truly unique, has to be done locally. The instructional methodology for somebody in the School of Nursing is very different than the instruction methodology for somebody in Carlson School. So when you get to that end, the part that's closest to the instructor or faculty member, it's not a commodity yet. It's very unique. The challenge is that things start there and then they have to move centrally. So we're always centralizing things. Things like, if we think back 2 decades ago, it was unique to have, let's go 4 decades ago first. It was unique to have a phone system. So many places would actually stand up their own local phone systems. We centralized the phones. Then about 2 decades ago, it was unique to have networks. So the computer science department built their own network, right? And then everybody built their own network. And then we centralized the networks. That high-end desktop support was something that A, wasn't done adequately centrally, and B, had to be highly customized, because you think about computers a decade ago, they were kind of complicated. Now they're pretty standard mainstream devices. So that's something we're centralizing now. There is a shift to centralize them. And then once we have them centralized, we often move them to the private sector. So things like our phone system or our network, those are things where they really are now commodities that we're doing centrally, and we get our dial tone now from the private sector instead of providing it ourselves. So it's always this kind of continuum. That being said, as a whole, it's not centralize it or distribute it. That's a false dichotomy, but to answer your question, there is a move more towards centralization, but it's not a move to total centralization.
Other questions? Regent Frobenius.
Following that, I've been figuring out, looking back at this chart that Regent Beeson just referred to about the overall cost of IT by function, and I was thinking through this centralization question. I was sort of trying to ask you what you thought this might look like at the end of the 6-year plan time period in terms of the relative balance. And then I kind of began to have to think about a different model. This may be a stretch in thinking, but if you think about really our foundation structure, you have a centralized, which we've now merged together, but we have a centralized foundation entity with a whole raft of foundation staff working very diligently on the needs of the School of Public Health or the College of Science and Engineering, pick your program, very actively engaging the central function resource into each of these institutions, or each of these sub-colleges. It strikes me that's really what you're sort of evolving towards here. Is that a reasonable analysis?
Yes, Chair Cohen, Regent Frobenius. When we look at on 2 ends of a spectrum, remembering it as a false dichotomy where you'd have the foundation model of a highly coordinated, centralized function, but it's distributed and federated to each college, versus more of what we have now, or even highly distributed. You could even imagine it being more distributed. We will be moving much closer to the foundation model, but it's really probably going to be something that's unique for IT. It'll probably be something that's a third model that we haven't fully finalized or baked up yet, but as we evolve towards it, it will be more towards that foundation model. I'm looking forward to learning from the the Huron report on recommendations on how to get us there.
Regent Devine.
Vice President, thank you for the fine report and the follow-up from the time that we went through our approval, just what seemed like just a few short months ago. It's obvious that they've made great progress. The graph that I found interesting was on the graph on page 7, which you had the comparable schools in the quartiles. Is there an optimal positioning? You know, the variance between all the various schools there, many of whom are the comparables that we typically benchmark off of, is there an optimal positioning within that quartile graph on where we want to eventually end up here? Is there an emulation that we're trying to follow relative to that, or is it still kind of in progress?
Chair Cohen, Regent Devine, I think that's an excellent question. I don't think we can change that graph. I think we have to just observe that that's our culture. We can look at we're going to evolve it in a direction, right? So I would say our dot will evolve from, I don't have the graph in front of me, but it's in the upper right-hand corner, I believe, is where we are. Is that correct? Thank you. More towards the lower left-hand corner. We'll start gradually moving that direction.
So with these updates and with these changes, then, you'll see a positioning moving in terms of what that graph looks like now versus, say, 5 years from now.
Right. My hope and aspiration would be that we will consolidate the right aspects, so we'll centralize the right aspects of information technology, realizing there's always a local need for truly customized, unique services. So it's going to move more that direction, so I think that's moving down the axis. Likewise, we're very formalized, and we're very process-oriented, very risk-averse. I'd like us to see us move a little less formality in some of our decision-makings in IT, specifically due to the pace by which IT is made.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice President Studham, we appreciate your report. Thank you very much, and go Gophers, okay?
Thank you.
Now, we would like to have an update on operational excellence initiatives. So, President Kaler, we look forward to your update on operational excellence, and I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Larson. My Vice President for IT has left the podium, so I don't know how there we go, okay. Presentation is going to come up in a minute for you, and you have paper copies in front of you. While that is loading, let me go ahead and begin my comments. Chair Cohen, Vice Chair Larson, members of the board, I will remind you on September 22nd, 2001, the day of my inauguration, I said these words. I said, driving excellence in our mission activities is not enough. We must also be excellent in our operations. In every aspect of university operations, we need to question what we do. We need to know if it has the intended outcome, or if we could do it better, or not at all. And I added, this institution needs to have an administrative backbone that is effective in supporting teaching, research, and public engagement. Pardon me. Since then, I have repeatedly emphasized operational excellence as one of my top priorities. Through this work, we are linking the efficiency and effectiveness of our business operations to the excellence and accessibility of the university. Over the past 18 months, I have convened 60 operational excellence meetings with my senior leadership team. In your committees, many of you have heard reports on various aspects of this work and culture change. Now, for the entire board, I'm excited to tell you more about operational excellence and where we stand. I want to show you why and how we live this every day, to share with you success stories, challenges, and next steps. I also want to preview for you the interim report that we will be presenting to the legislature next week. This report includes an initial analysis of our management structure, that is, our spans of control and organizational layers, and also our plan to benchmark our costs and operations against peer institutions. So what is operational excellence? First and foremost, it is to mitigate the impact of state budget reductions and to keep a lid on tuition. Operational excellence is a long-term commitment to work smarter, reduce costs, enhance services, and increase revenues throughout the university. It's using our resources, people, money, time, and facilities to the highest possible purpose. It is not just about saving money, although that's obviously an important goal. As importantly, it's also about getting more out of our limited resources and about realizing a better way of doing things. It is about change. Why operational excellence? Because as the state disinvests, as our students and families pay more tuition, and as research dollars become scarcer, we need to reduce our administrative costs so we can reallocate resources to what's important: teaching, research, and public engagement. How are we making it happen? In every way we can, small and large, from our ambitious enterprise system upgrade program to a reduction in cell phone subsidies for employees, to voicemail efficiency, to IT reorganization, to risk recalibration, to changes in procurement, to the closing of administrative offices, and to the tightening of reporting lines, we are becoming more and more operationally excellent. And Vice President Studham's presentation is an example of what we're doing. So let me tell you more about our approach and how we set priorities and measure progress, and I'll even share some success stories. I convened the first meeting of our Operational Excellence Group of senior leaders and senior staff on September 6, 2011. That was the first day of the first week of the first semester of my first year as president. I walked into the room with reports in hand from the consulting group Bain & Company, and with knowledge of my experience with working with them at Stony Brook. I asked the group if we should pursue a similar engagement here. At a minimum, I suggested we review the Bain recommendations and track them against the U's operations. I also mentioned the words spans and layers for the first time, suggesting we complete an analysis of how many layers of management we had and how many employees report to each manager. Long before the current request from the legislature, it's been a priority of ours. I quickly got a thoughtful and educated earful from my senior leaders. I was told, Mr. President, we've already done many of the things in these studies, and on many functions, we've completed similar analysis. We have a number of reports, and they include recommendations that have not yet been implemented. Some of my colleagues argued that only by using a third-party expert would our work be credible to the broader public. Others were concerned about spending hundreds of thousands of dollars for a consultant when we had both external and internally generated reports still ready to implement. Ultimately, we decided to work through those existing reports as a first step. We also established guiding principles to set priorities. We wanted to achieve administrative cost reductions and/or improvements in productivity. We wanted to reduce redundancy and duplication. We wanted to promote entrepreneurialism, seize opportunities, and enhance organizational flexibility and adaptability. And we want to, and are already, recalibrating the university's risk profile to achieve greater efficiencies while enhancing service. As ideas came forward and we reviewed recommendations already developed, we asked whether they achieved these goals. Meanwhile, as we implemented operational excellence, we want to do it in a way that first manages both operational and cultural aspects of our change. Secondly, adopts and shares best practices. Thirdly, develops core competencies and breaks down silos. Fourthly, adopts sustainable and replicable business models. And finally, develops qualitative and quantitative measures of effectiveness. So with those principles in mind, from September of 2011 to December of 2011, we examined all of the reports produced in the previous 6 years. And in recent years, this university, our university, has done a lot. It closed and merged colleges, implemented an enterprise-wide energy reduction program, important purchasing initiatives, and improved processes in many functional areas. That's the good news. The bad news is there was not a lot of low-hanging fruit left to pick. And that meant moving the U to the next level of operational excellence would require more data, thoughtful analysis, consultation, and tough decisions. And it would probably take longer than I wanted. So our first action was to review and prioritize opportunities. Among the actions, we held listening sessions to gather input about making change at the university from frontline operations managers. We learned that the university was too risk-averse and too regulatory, more mired in saying no than in finding ways to say yes. The university can do more to unleash entrepreneurialism and identifying best practices for achieving efficiencies and scaling them up where appropriate. The university needs to improve its change management and problem-solving skills. And finally, we heard that consultation is important, but there are pitfalls to over-consulting, especially as it affects the speed of innovation. And moreover, the people in our listening sessions felt the university does not always consult in the right way. We also learned that being highly decentralized gives units autonomy and nimbleness, but it also can promote redundancy, institutional silos, and a lack of alignment. We also learned that our human resources information system is out of date, hampering our ability to accurately benchmark and make data-driven decisions. We also launched a risk recalibration effort to change our highly risk-averse culture. During that process, we identified more than 220 policies and processes as candidates for recalibration in 8 areas of opportunity: administrative optimization, finance, procurement, compliance and policy, human resources, and information technology. We also can explore the physical environment and the service culture and the research infrastructure. While we've made much progress in these areas, I've come to see this idea of areas of opportunity as somewhat limiting. Operational excellence doesn't simply drop into an area. It cuts across areas of opportunities. It cuts across campuses, colleges, and across units within central administration. It does not occur in silos. And let me give you a real example that illustrates the opportunities, the challenges, and the complexity of the kind of change we are making. It's a story about Craig Bontz. Craig's the Director of Technology Innovation within our College of Biological Sciences. Finding and developing innovative technology solutions for research, education, and the day-to-day work of CBS is at the core of what he does. But the problem is that too much day-to-day work can overwhelm and bog down innovation. So Craig and CBS IT made a number of moves recently to put the core of IT back in the hands of the college. They transferred the position responsible for installing updates and software on CBS computers, that is, computer management, to central OIT. That move saved the college about $90,000 a year, while freeing CBS IT staff to work on research support and educational endeavors such as instructional technology. But it's not just a shifting of cost. Because of the nature of the work, the position that was transferred is scalable. As CBS was moving some administrative IT work to our core mission, our central office of IT was also consolidating our help desk operations. It's an example of centralization. And the key is that the same amount of work that an IT specialist needs to do to manage 500 computers can scale to having him or her manage 5,000 computers. That puts CBS IT staff member who transferred to OIT in a position that now can benefit others at the university. Big savings in time and money also came to CBS when the college moved its 3,000 plus web pages to a new web content management system. Plus, when CBS lost a web manager to a new job, they took the opportunity to evaluate the primary responsibilities of the position and found that by moving to this user-friendly content management system, they could avoid rehiring that person, saving $75,000 while at the same time winding up with a more efficient process. So together, those steps have saved CBS about $165,000, or approximately 5% of the $3 million CBS administration budget. So the bottom line is that CBS is now spending less on information technology services than it has at any time in the last decade, while at the same time getting more out of IT than they did before. Now that story is one of many. It's a great success story, and it's a little bit in the details. But it illustrates what needs to change operationally and what we've been able to change so far, and it moves function out of silos. So while we have those 8 areas of opportunity, we have begun to see patterns develop, or baskets in which we can place the fruits of our opportunities. They are, more simply, standardization and centralization, cost cutting and cost containment, business efficiency, shared services, and revenue generation. Which leads to next week, and the interim report we will be making to the legislator are on our administrative structure analysis and key cost benchmarking. And to remind you, on January 8th of this year, Senator Terry Bonoff, chair of the Higher Education and Workforce Development Committee, and Senator Tom Bach, the majority leader, wrote to me requesting a, quote, data-driven approach to analyzing the cost of delivering educational services, close quote, at the University of Minnesota. Senators Bonoff and Bach called for a short-term analysis, such as a spans and layers study, as well as an in-depth, longer-term examination. In asking for an interim report no later than March 15th of this year, Senators Bach and Bonoff requested these studies to develop clear and measurable analytics so efficiency goals can be met. The University of Minnesota retained Simpson Consulting, a division of the Siegel Company, to conduct a spans and layers analysis of 4 central administrative units: Human Resources, Budget and Finance, Information Technology, and Purchasing Services, which performs procurement functions for the university. Given the breadth of these units and the short time frame under which this work was to be accomplished, these 4 units were the only ones that could be adequately assessed. However, and this is important, the university is committed to completing a spans and layers analysis throughout the remainder of our administrative functions across the organization, with a deadline of the summer of this year. The scope of Simpson's work for the report was shared and submitted and discussed with the senators as well as the legislative auditor on Friday, January 25th. So first, let me walk you through the concept of spans and layers, which Simpson refers to as levels. So in this organizational chart, the span is the number of employees who report to one's supervisors, sort of the wingspan. So you can see the CEO here has a span of 7. The number of levels or layers is the number of people between an organizational leader and his or her first-line staff. So there are a couple of ways to assess the organization's spans and levels. Let me show you the data. So, you see here the results for the Office of Human Resources, IT, Finance, and Procurement. You see, and let me just walk you through the human resource one so you're oriented. You see level 1 includes 1 person, that's Vice President Brown. She is a supervisor, and she supervises 9 people. Okay? That 9 people translates to level 2, which has 9 people, because they're all supervised by Kathy. Of those 9 people, 7 of them are supervisors, and 2 of them are not. And those supervisors supervise anywhere between 1 person and 11 people, with the average span being 5.43. So those 9 people supervise the 34 people in the level, well, the 38 people in the level before. Of those 38 people, 18 are non-supervisors, 20 are supervisors, supervising anywhere between 1 and 12 people with an average of 5.15, and so on. So the bottom line is that the headcount in that unit, Central OHR, is 162, of which 33 are supervisors, 20%, and they supervise anywhere from 1 to 12 people with an average range of 4.88. So there are 2 ways to look at this. Let me talk with you first about the way the management consulting firm Bain & Company looks at these data. This is a firm, remember, with which I had worked at Stony Brook. According to their approach, the 4 units are close to alignment with best practices in terms of the level of units. In other words, how many levels or layers are there. They generally recommend no more than 5 or 6 levels in an organization, from the organization's leader to frontline employees. 3 of these are in alignment with at 6 levels, and the 4th, finance, has 7. Bain generally recommends spans of control of approximately 7 direct reports or more, depending on the type of work being done in the unit in question. And the average spans of control here range from a low of 6.63 in procurement to a high of 9.44 5.3 in OIT. Obviously, some units below what Bain says is the right number and some above. That creates opportunity. We could do more to increase the number of direct reports per supervisor across 3 of these 4 areas. The work requires careful analysis, position by position, to ensure that potential changes make sense. And I'll refer you again to the OHR slide, where you see that at level 4, there are 5 supervisors supervising 11 people at level 5. That is the kind of information that a study like this shows, and you need to ask the question of why that supervisory arrangement is. There may be perfectly good reasons, but you need to ask the question. So that's the Bain approach. Now let me talk to you about the Simpson methodology, which is a little harder to see. They begin the analysis with a hypothesis that the average spans of control should be about equal to the levels in the organization, so that the ratio of the span to the levels should be about 1, so that an organization is about as broad as it is deep. It's an emerging industry standard, they tell us, but it's also a starting point and not an end in itself. Extremes in either direction are problematic. More narrow and vertical organizations can be top-heavy, sluggish, and expensive. Extremely flat and broad organizations can be disorganized and difficult to manage effectively. So organizations that have a ratio of spans to layers below 1 should look at that organizational structure and the work being done in those areas to more closely determine where change is needed. Same is true for ratios well above 1. Again, to refer to the organizational chart, here you'll notice that the director identified on the left side has a single report, clearly an indication of a small span that should be examined more carefully. So this is a graphic from Simpson, and it illustrates in a slightly different way what I just showed you on the previous slide. Again, let's look at OHR, 129 total employees, and the layers indicate the height of the organization. And on layer 5, there's 1 person who supervises 9 people. That's the vice president. Underneath, et cetera. And the stair-stepped red line is from Simpson, and their suggestion of a ratio below which we should not go. And what you see is in OHR, we have all told 8 people to the left of that ratio of 1. That's 5% of the personnel in OHR. And the pie chart above represents that 5% opportunity in the Simpson analysis. So those 8 employees have 1 person each, and we will look at what those people do. Again, this is not the silver bullet. It calls out areas of organization that need to be examined, and we will do that. And again, you see in OIT, only 2% of the people have 1 report, and in an organization of 402 people doing work, that's a pretty good ratio. So again, what you see here, so to review, we do not have an excessive number of levels in those 4 central organizations. Will we find cases in which we do as we propagate this through the institution? Maybe, and we'll take action if we do. We could do more to increase the number of direct reports per supervisor across the units assessed, but our overall ratio of spans to levels is appropriate according to Simpson, but clearly we have opportunities to improve. In addition to the spans and layers analysis, at the request of the senators, we completed a benchmarking and diagnostic, we will complete a benchmarking and diagnostic study. This will take a little bit longer time. The university has retained Huron Consulting Group, a global consulting firm that's worked with 94 of the top 100 research universities to benchmark administrative costs in the 4 functional areas of finance, human resources, information technology, and procurement. Benchmarking study will provide an independent third-party benchmarking of operations in those 4 functional areas against peer organizations to identify opportunities for improvement, barriers to optimal performance, and leading practices at peer institutions. That project will be completed by May 31st, and we eagerly await their findings. The university will use data from these reports to help reduce costs, but importantly to improve operations and better align human and other resources to advance teaching and research. I think you know I am committed to improving operational excellence in all that we do. We expect changing some alignments will require tough decisions, but we will make those changes in a transparent and fair way. I have repeatedly said that I will reduce administrative costs and move those dollars to core mission activities. But it's premature to declare a specific cost reduction target that will result. We'll first complete the data collection and see where the organization as a whole sits. Then we will make the moves to more optimally align that organization. We're going to complete the spans and layers analysis across the organization and the benchmarking study. In areas where the ratio of employees to supervisors does not appear to be optimal, we'll analyze function and we will set near-term roles for reducing layers as needed or increasing spans of control. To prevent spans from creeping back into the organization over time, we will ensure that all non-academic positions are properly classified and fit with the optimal organization. We're expediting our job family studies and job classification redesign, which has been underway now for more than a year. It will complement and strengthen the spans and layers analysis and ensure employee classifications accurately reflect the work being performed, and we're going to adopt policies and guidelines to achieve these goals. Now, this is not easy work, and typically universities that take on this kind of redesign spend 3 to 5 years to implement those changes. I'm not interested in spending 3 to 5 years to implement these changes, and we will put our foot on the gas. My goal is 2 to 3 years. So that's where we stand with the legislative request on spans and layers and benchmarking, and I'll appreciate your feedback and comments in the questioning period. Now, where we stand on operational excellence progress is, I believe, impressive and encouraging. But again, in operational excellence, there's not a finite checklist. It is a new way to do things, and it's important to keep in mind how we steward the university. There is no particular ending date, and as I say, there's no checklist. Let me briefly review our progress to date. As I said when I began the report, we've been talking to leadership and staff about operational excellence since the day I got here, and we've also been talking with this board about operational excellence. For example, we completed 2 first-of-their-kind studies to assess the full cost of mission activities and define administrative costs at the university. This is important. I don't know of another university that has done this kind of analysis to understand how they work and therefore to be able to measure and monitor how they get better. If you don't measure these things, you can't change them. So last summer, we completed a study on the cost of instruction, research, public service, and student aid, and that was presented to you. Last fall, we completed an administrative cost study, which I think is groundbreaking, and it details where we spend our funds for direct mission support, and administrative leadership. And we found out that 9% of our fully allocated costs are for administration and management. Meanwhile, we are implementing the enterprise system upgrade for human resource, student, and financial system. We eliminated the Office for Academic Administration, and cost savings for that transition are estimated as close to $1.6 million, 1.1 recurring and 500,000 non-recurring. Last month, pursuant to this board's direction, the University of Minnesota Foundation and the Minnesota Medical Foundation merged, improving donor relations and reducing back office costs by approximately $1 million annually. In September 2012, to better align and streamline our operations and reduce duplication, we implemented a dotted line reporting relationship between central admin and the 4 functional areas of HR, IT, finance, and communication, and you heard Vice President Studham talk about the impact of that in his organization. In May of 2010, a system-wide inventory project found nearly 4,000 servers, computer servers, from 50 different hardware manufacturers located in more than 225 locations across the U of M system. That's a lot. Since then, we've reduced the number of physical servers by half, and approximately 40 server rooms have been closed. Cost savings continue to be realized of approximately $1.5 million annually. In addition, $1.5 million in one-time cost avoidance has been achieved by those server room closings. Meanwhile, IT professionals across the U are working together to consolidate over 50 independently run help desks into a single point of contact for technology support needs. Several years ago, we became the first public university to tap Google for its ever-evolving suite of applications. We were one of the first higher education institutions to offer the entire suite of apps to faculty and staff. An analysis by the external research firm Gartner Incorporated estimates the move is valued at more than $15 million a year. We've improved accounts receivable billings and collections, reducing outstanding balances for 39,000 invoices with cash activity of $769 million. We closed the bursar's office, savings of more than $775 million annually. And with strategic sourcing and e-procurement, we're saving $7.6 million a year system-wide in purchasing. Across 5 campuses and 19 research and outreach centers, the university is home to more than 850 buildings, 29 million gross square feet. And every day, well over 100,000 faculty, staff, students, and visitors use those facilities across the state. Since the start of the space utilization initiative, more than 320,000 gross square feet have been decommissioned, reducing annual operating costs by about $1.5 million. In 2010, the university launched It All Adds Up, a system-wide conservation and sustainability effort, saving about $4.6 million annually. In 2011, the university implemented a new custodial program on the Twin Cities campus featuring team cleaning. It's allowed facilities management to clean the same amount of space with fewer employees, saving us $3.1 million annually. We've transitioned to an automated parking payment system, which eliminates, unfortunately, jobs for parking attendants, but it saves us $1.35 million in personnel and generates $180,000 annually in increased revenue. And I'll note, when we eliminate jobs, we do our very best to place people elsewhere and to do it fairly and with compassion, and it is not easy. So we have done, I think, a fair number of things on operational excellence, but much remains to be done. And many of these things are relatively small, they're relatively tactical, but as the saying goes, it adds up. Next steps, beyond the spans and layers and benchmarking work, our next activities will include developing metrics and a dashboard to better track and communicate progress. We will align our work to the strategic priorities identified through the planning process later this year. We'll continue to drive alignment across this very decentralized organization by standardizing processes, and we will work smarter and reduce cost. So I think the past 20 months shows that I'm committed to that, and our senior leadership is committed. With new technologies, new teaching methods, uncertain times, and improvements in everything we do, we will not rest in striving to make this university as efficient and effective as it can be, so we can carry on our mission of teaching, research, and solving the state's most pressing problems. So in closing, this board has critical and fundamental oversight responsibilities for the operations of this university. And as outlined in the policy responsibilities of the board and individual regents, you accept fiducial responsibility for the long-term welfare of this university, and you ensure adequate resources, human, financial, physical, and effective management of these resources. So with that in mind, as we begin our conversation on operational excellence, I would suggest some relevant questions would be, in what ways will these efforts be benchmarked and measured so the board can monitor our progress? How will we use these reforms to enhance the public image of the university? And how should operational metrics be incorporated into our annual university plan performance and accountability report? So with that, Regent Larson, I conclude my report and stand for your questions.
Thank you, President Kaler. I'd like to make a couple of comments before I open the floor to other comments that the rest of the regents would like to make or questions. As you know, and as noted, President Kaler will be presenting this report to the Senate Higher Education and Workforce Development Committee on March 12th. I commend President Kaler, Vice President Brown, and their staffs for working tirelessly to prepare such an important analysis in such a short amount of time. And now I have a comment to make, President. I found it interesting that on page 12 of your report, the last bullet point says, we must ensure that the right people are doing the right work in the right way and at the right level of the organization. And I commend you for that, because it's not, in my opinion, it's been my experience, it's not just enough to do with spans and layers, but you got to make sure you got the right people in the right spots under the right circumstances. And in many, many cases, many institutions, and perhaps including this one, have a need for change agents in a particular position, and that particular job is not filled by a change agent. And that can make all the difference in the world. So I commend you for that thought, that you're not, you are telling us, if I understand it correctly, that the work is not complete until you make sure that we have the right people in the right positions doing the right work in the right way. And that's just as important as everything else you've already done, in my opinion, from my experience. So I commend you for that. And now I would like to open the floor to questions or comments. Regent Simmons.
Thank you, Vice Chair Larson. Mr. President, I won't compliment you on this report, though it is very good, but rather on the work that it reveals. This is extraordinary accomplishment in a very short period of time. It is remarkable and noteworthy, and thank you for all that went into it, and the same with the people of the university. I also won't ask you, but I will express my hope that the request from the Senate leaders did not invoke undue costs and did not delay you too much on the progress you're making on achieving operational excellence.
Thank you, Regent Simmons, Vice Chair Larson. The costs are not small. On this, there's a $48,000 charge for the Simpson number, and the Huron report will be for a little bit less than $500,000. I believe it's $495,000. But those are investments in operations. Those reports will enable us, particularly the Huron report, will enable us to benchmark and to drive costs. And they're also important tools internally. I think it's clear to people in our organization that we need to change the way we're doing. The status quo is not okay. But an external voice is sometimes more convincing than internal ones. Clearly, on the spans and layers, this was activity we had planned to do in order to accomplish it within the time frame requested by the senators. We needed to bring in some external help, and you do have third-party validity. But we will continue to drive that in our organization, and we have knowledge internally to do much of this work. We'll be very judicious in using external resources. Some of our peer institutions who have used, let me be a little careful, other consulting firms, these can be extremely expensive, and we will use it very judiciously.
Okay.
If I just may finish my comment, it's clear you are getting the information to know what to do, but even more remarkable is you're doing it, and that's the hard part, and I really commend you on that.
Regent Simmons and Vice Chair Larson, it is not easy, and I really have to commend the team, and I should have done that at the outset. Vice President Brown, Vice President Fitzenreiter, my Chief of Staff, Amy Phoenix, and a very strong staff team, Matt Samara, Liz Ewell, and others have been absolutely terrific in getting this done. We are focused on moving the dial on this. It's very important.
President, having been there, done that, it's not easy, but it sometimes can be fun. So that's the good news.
Well,
making positive change to build a great institution can be a lot of fun. Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Vice Chair Larson and Chair Cohen. Thank you, Mr. President. It can't be stated loudly enough that the fact that President Kaler began this work on operational excellence and institutionalizing it almost the first day he got here, and there's lots of evidence of those initiatives, and we're really into the swing of those things now. We've talked a lot about our accountability report. These metrics and these processes need to show up as add-ons to that report. One specific question I have, Mr. President, on the spans and levels is because we're talking about Office of Information Technology at the moment, I would assume at some point this drops. This is the central office function for that area, that part of this grid. But at some point, does that analysis sort of extend down into the collegiate, the academic level, where we'll see, whether they've got a different ratio there? I don't know if that's part of the summer report or that's a report later, or when that sort of gets completed. Thank you.
Regent Peace and Vice Chair Larson. To put this in perspective, we have about 25,000 FTE employees. So we've done about 850 of them so far, and that's just the analysis. So it takes some time to get this done. We are going to push it as far into the organization, frankly, as makes sense, and that will be a call for us. It's just clearly an opportunity, as I told you with my little story about our colleagues in CBS and IT. It's 1,000 adjustments that will make this organization be great. And I want my legacy here to be, in part, a great organization that is highly functioning, that attracts the best employees, that retains them, and that engages all of us at the highest level possible to drive this institution forward.
Regent McMillan.
Thank you, Vice Chair Larson. I applaud your commitment to speed, President Kaler, and I want to pick up on the car analogy there. You said we're going to put the gas on this. We're not going to take years. I don't think there can be an S on that word, years. So I applaud that. I encourage it. But one piece of this puzzle that we're deeply into in the Faculty and Staff Committee is the job classification work that's underway. And the only caution I would have on the speed piece of this is some of that work's got to be relatively fundamental to this. If we don't have good job classification work, it's like, again, stretching the travel analogy, do we have a map without a legend? What are we going to do with it? So I'd like your thoughts on how you put those two pieces of this puzzle together.
Thank you, Regent McMillan, Vice Chair Larson. Extremely important point. And this spans and layers analysis, I should emphasize, is just one part of a really very comprehensive redesign and recalibration in the Office of Human Resources that Vice President Brown is leading. Not having the right kind of job classification structure here is, it's not fair. And I try, whatever criticisms you get, I try not to be criticized for not being fair. And to have employees doing the same job in different parts of the organization with different classifications and different career trajectories and different salaries isn't fair to those people. And so getting that right is critically important. I think there will be an interesting and I think productive synergy between these two activities, because as we do spans and layers as we are now and identify somebody who's supervising one person and rearrange those activities so that another person has greater span, that provides then the opportunity to map into a job reclassification and say, okay, here's what you're really doing and how it fits. So they're hand in glove, but this being Minnesota, you don't want your gloves way out in front of your hands here either. And so your caution on making those synergies work is very well taken.
Sure. Yes, go ahead. Regent Johnson.
Thank you, Vice Chair Larson. Mr. President, thank you for the report and the amount of work you and the staff have been doing. Maybe this is more of an observation, but yeah, it's a question. The question is this: within an organization, large, small, or such as the University of Minnesota, what I'm getting at is the mood and attitude of administrators and chancellors and vice presidents. Are they having coffee on Monday morning and say, you know, the boss is under some fire and he needs to do some things, and I hope this passes so we can get back to normal kind of business? I watched that in some organizations, and from your remarks, I know you're deeply serious and committed to this. So the question is, are folks on the bandwagon with you in this reorganization and reconstitution and planning as we move forward? Because if they're dragging their feet, that can make it very difficult. And human beings, we do drag our feet because we don't like to change. So what's the sense of the folks around the university community? Please.
Sure. Regent Johnson, Vice Chair Larson. One advantage of the really large amount of leadership, senior leadership change we've had at the university in the past 20 months is an opportunity for me to bring my team together, and that's part of our conversation. I think you can see from Vice President Studham his commitment to driving change in OIT. Kathy Brown is committed to doing that in HR. Vice President Fritzenreiter, who's also played a huge role in this activity, understands and as it is well before I got here, committed to change in finance. So the team is on board, and if there's some reluctance and foot dragging, then we will have a very frank and candid private conversation.
Very good. I was hoping that's what you'd say.
Regent Frobenius.
A couple of comments, and they've sort of evolved as I've been waiting in line here, but I really feel very, very good about the reports we got today, the information we've been given today, particularly about the Operation Excellence Report, more than the spans and layers. The spans and layers was a specific assignment. It gives us a picture at a point in time of 4 areas of the university, or 4 departments of the university, and we'll build on that. But the OE accomplishments are significant, and I can't underwrite that hard enough, because not only are they significant, this is really, really hard work to get done. You don't do this by just changing the organizational structure. You have to change how we do the work in order to make these types of things happen. And that's, I think, the effort you're doing. And the most important part of this is what I'm hearing from you. And I hope we can continue to measure, and maybe as you do more of the employee engagement activities, it becomes a part of that, because this has to be built into the culture. One of our questions here is operational metrics. And the ongoing continuous part of this process may very well be that we got to take a significant portion of the annual inflation we have out of the organization's cost each year through these types of ongoing efforts. I mean, that's really, in my mind, something that becomes how you measure how well we're doing. Well, that makes it a pretty significant effort over time. I encourage you to continue your efforts to look at ways to build this into the culture. I find ways for this board to be aware of it. Let's create opportunities to celebrate this and recognize the successes that occur in a very public way. Continue to measure that as we go forward. Continue to do it. I mean, the goal out of this really is to develop a culture that says, okay, we did these wonderful things last year. Now, here it comes. We got to do it all over again, because we got to make it a little bit better next year. And but we can do that. And the we can do it part is the critical part of what you're doing. So I recognize and celebrate your efforts to date, and let us know how we can be a further help in accomplishing that.
Thank you, Regent Frobenius, Vice Chair Larson. Let me just amplify one part of your comments, if I may. It's critical that we do this on the business and operation sides of our institution, because we have to put those resources in our primary missions of teaching, research, and public engagement and outreach. And only by doing that in this environment are we going to be able to excel on what we must do. We can only be excellent in those areas by driving resources out of these kind of things into support of those. And I think we'll have more pride in the institution, we'll have more engagement, we'll begin to slay the urban myth of what how this university runs, and that's a very important thing to me.
Regent Devine.
There's much that I can't say that hasn't maybe already been said to this point, commending you really on your first phase of your presidency and your pursuit of Operation Excellence here in terms of what's going on and the accountability to the state that I think everybody has been looking for. Let me just say that this is really also a clear demonstration of what the board has been involved with over the last several years since you've come aboard, and the fact that this realignment and the searching process that we've been going through and the examination process has been indeed very thorough. And I think a lot of the public hasn't really understood that, but I think it's now important to maybe highlight that at this particular juncture of this first phase of this project being completed. I'd also encourage you to communicate very carefully the impact to the students and to the general public in a much broader way than what we maybe have up to this point. Certainly the impact of better learning outcomes, the freeing up of funds and whatnot that can be reapplied in other ways that fulfill mission or needs to be articulated also very carefully as a component of this. And finally, let me say that the work that's been taking place since your arrival here is really a template for higher education in America right now. We are on the forefront, I think, of dealing with a lot of what's being viewed right now publicly across America about what needs to be done to realign higher education. And we have now, as a board and as your presidency has demonstrated, really tackled the problem very sincerely, very effectively. And I would encourage you to share this with your colleagues as you meet with your colleagues across the country, because I think there is a lot to be learned, and we're setting a benchmarking process here at the University of Minnesota that we can be quite proud of under your leadership and direction.
Thank you, Regent Devine, Vice Chair Larson. I do think we really are in front of our peer institutions around the country in doing this kind of analysis, and I think it's very important to do, because we get, as we all know, tarred by things like IPEDS data, which are useless for intercomparison with totally useless in intercomparing institutions. Yet that gets in the public view. So if we're able to put together a reliable and an understandable and transparent and accurate way of representing what we're doing, that's very important. And our total cost accounting now, we know what we spend on this. We spend 9% of our budget. No other institution can give us that number in the same comparable way. But if you look at nonprofits that have a 9% overhead on their operation, that's not a bad number.
Okay. Regent Allen.
Well, first of all, Vice Chair Larson, will you poke me when the fun starts in case I miss it?
I was going to ask for that too, Regent Allen.
Thank you. Also, following up on Regent Johnson's point, the President's answer was a good one and I believe very correct, but just to add some evidence to that, some of us have worked very hard over the last several years on long-range planning, financial planning. And throughout that, faculty have been outspoken in support of efforts like that. And I believe that's some evidence that they recognize that these kinds of things have to be done. You know, after all, I think we ought to make no bones about the fact we try to pinch pennies here and there where we can, because that helps us to live within the budget, but it also makes the dollars available when they have good ideas to pursue. So you pinch pennies and then you spend the dollars in the right place, and that's the whole attitude with which this is done. I want to make one final point. We have a lot of good work, and I don't need to repeat all the accolades that have been spoken about it, but I do want to put a framework around it. We are working on a system that, frankly, despite some of the complaints here and there, has been working pretty well, and the metrics driven by data show that. Just to cite a couple of them, yes, over the last 10 years or so, beginning in 2001, we've grown our head count by about 3%. But at that same time, The students we have per employee are up 11.3%. The degrees we're awarding, which translates, of course, from graduations, the degrees per employee during that time are up 28.2%. And the sponsored dollars coming in from outside, primarily from Washington, and yes, that's somebody's tax money for the most part, but indeed it's money coming into the state of Minnesota to ripple through the economy. Those sponsored dollars in that same time period are up 41.6% per employee. So something is going pretty right about the whole operation, despite the fact that we always need to be trying to improve it. So I commend and look forward to the results of these efforts, but I want to make it clear in my mind they are an opportunity to improve things from a pretty good operation to begin with, and I hope the legislature is listening.
Thanks for your comments, Regent Allen. I think you're right on. Whereas we know, and the President knows better than the rest of us, we still have significant opportunities for improvement. The fact of life is that in the last few years, we have made some significant improvements, and we're going to support you, Mr. President, to make a heck of a bunch more. So,
thank you, Regent Larson.
Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I'm glad Regent Allen mentioned about where those pennies can go that are saved through all this work. This work on productivity is consuming, it's often overwhelming. We also have to remember we are in the investment business. We are growing people, we are growing projects, we're growing facilities, we're growing the institution. We need to spend as much time on the investment area if we're gonna transform this university and not be totally consumed by what's a priority, internally generated and externally pressured, but we need to focus on investment too.
Regent Beeson, Vice Chair Larson, these two comments are critically important. Again, these are opportunities for us to put our dollars to higher and better use, and that's exactly what we should do. And the metrics of student achievement, research activity, you know, to be criticized for hiring some people in an era in which our research expenditures have increased by $200 million a year, at a time in which our four-year graduation rate has improved markedly, and to be criticized for hiring people to enable that to happen is a fact of life.
An unfortunate one.
It's a challenging one.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Regent Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can't help but ask this question, Mr. President. Are you going to call that gentleman out in New York and present this to him?
Regent Johnson and Vice Chair Larson, I don't think I'm going to do that, no, sir.
Then I will. I'm only kidding, but, you know, sometimes, and I think the opportunity, you and the administration and this board have used this as an opportunity to look at our finances, look at administration, look at ourselves, and we are going to be a much better, more effective, efficient university because of it. So in some ways, we could almost say, you know, thank you for what you've done. I know there's work to be done over in St. Paul now. You've already begun that, and people are asking good questions and receiving good information. So as painful as that was, Mr. President, for all of us at some point in time, I think the tide is turning, and things will be better for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Regent Allen.
Just a quick one. I think I'm correct on this, that much of the information you may be talking about was supplied to the Wall Street Journal. But when you've got a good headline and you've got only so many column inches, the information that goes in is what supports the headline. I'm glad we don't have quite that same operation here with our press. Thank you. We get pretty good coverage.
Okay. Well, if I understand it correctly, the Facilities and Operations Committee was the only one that met this month, If I'm incorrect about that, please raise your hand, otherwise we won't ask for a report.
Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee, yes, the Facilities and Operations Committee did labor this morning, unlike other committees.
At least we woke up.
2 action items for your consideration. The committee voted unanimously to recommend approval of the real estate transaction for the purchase of 78.13 acres in Carver County for landscape arboretum. I move its approval.
Discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. The committee voted unanimously to recommend approval of the real estate transaction for the 8-year lease of 16,774 square feet at 1200 Washington Avenue South, Minneapolis, for the Academic Health Center, Medical School Advanced Research and Diagnostic Laboratory on the Twin Cities campus. Mr. Chair, I move its approval.
Vice Chair Larson, sorry, Chuck, I could get your attention.
Oh.
I don't think I have a conflict here, but if anybody thinks I do, I'm happy to recuse.
I don't think so, no.
Okay, may I have a motion?
So I move its approval.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Mr. Vice Chair, members, non-action items, the committee discussed and received information on the final project review of Amundsen Hall, Gore Annex Addition, and infrastructure upgrades on the Twin Cities campus, and the final project review for laboratories, classroom facilities of the Itasca Biological Station. Mr. President and Vice Chair and members, both projects are on time and on budget or in moving forth in a good, timely fashion. So thank you. That concludes my report on behalf of the Facilities and Operations Committee.
Thank you, Regent Johnson. Okay, I believe we are about ready to go on. Is there any old business? Any new business? Okay, not hearing anything. I now make the statement that the Board of Regents meeting is hereby adjourned. Thank you.